sometimes I don't leave the logo up when I'm checking it because I don't have like music or nothing in the background. And it could have been a logo saved from the last time or something. It might give you a false sense of whatever. So I go here. So let's see.
You said don't put the logo up?
Not yet. Yeah, sometimes you have to hit the play button. So we're live, but go ahead and say something.
Testing microphone. Testing microphone. 1, 2, 3. Testing microphone. 1, 2, 3.
Is that big of a delay?
But it's only 30 seconds. But even on the other end, they don't know it because it's like when it starts.
Testing microphone. Testing microphone. 1, 2, 3. Testing microphone. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, so go ahead and put the logo up, and we'll leave the logo up. Turn those off.
Hi, how are you doing? It is great to see you. My name is Dr. Maya Byfield. We're coming from the Altamont campus. Thank you guys for joining. We are here live with myself. We'll just have some introductions to start with.
Hi, my name is Yashreen Nix.
Okay, Yashreen is a student here, pre-nursing.
I'm Janet Balanoff. I'm the Associate Vice President for Equity and Diversity, and I'm the Title IX Coordinator for Seminole State.
Hi, my name is Betsy Rosas, and I'm a student.
What kind of student?
Pre-professional biology student.
We'll just get right into it. It's been an amazing discussion, 7 weeks long, lots of information that we are gathering, and I hope that you can ask certain questions. Gerald is not here today, so you can message me at byfieldm at seminolestate.edu, BYF as in Frank, IELD as in David, M as in Maya, right? And I'll be sure as I can to see the questions or statements that you would have. So we'll start off with Black Minds Matter, a focus on Black boys and men in education, particularly campus climates and non-cognitive outcomes. What are some takeaways that you discovered from today's video?
You want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to dive right in and ask you about the first one because I had some questions about this. And that was, the takeaway that I wrote down was the idea that the fixed mindset is out of style, the idea that intelligence is innate and unchangeable, they were not in favor of, and I'm trying to say that I think they were a little strict on that interpretation.
Yeah, I took that as well. I think they weren't clear enough in their interpretation. I do believe they believe in grit and perseverance, but I think they think that focusing too much on grit and not showing the capability of students, especially students of color, especially if they feel, if they have, like we learned a little later, that there might be some negative thought patterns that they are putting in themselves, that is so important to really push that you do have the ability. But I know a lot of other faculty and professors that will say it's not just about being innate, because that can backfire on people of color as well. So, and I know they believe that. So I think they didn't go deep enough in their interpretation of their, how do they say, disagreement with the fixed mindset. It's not they don't believe that it's only innate. They just want you to push ability to make them feel aware that you can do this. You have the ability to do this. You have the brain to do this. And it's not just hard work. Hard work is good, but it's a combination of both. That's what I think they should have really focused on.
They could have focused more on that because this week's video was almost 2 hours long.
Oh my God.
In my opinion, they had plenty of time to focus on characteristics as separate from this theory about the idea of the growth mindset being better than the fixed mindset when it comes to the research.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to fixed before we leave that because there's such a focus on the growth mindset.
Right.
The fixed mindset also brings me to another area of my responsibilities, which of course cover not only race and ethnicity, but the idea of the student with a disability. There are people who do not have the intelligence to complete everything as fast as others, no matter how much they work, or they do not have the wiring, for instance, to capture that intelligence in terms of taking a test quickly. I don't think this recognized differences in intellect as fixed. I think this should have had more of an emphasis.
Yeah, I think they wanted to attack the growth mindset, or not really attack it, but really
they really wanted to delve into it. That I would agree.
And yeah, they didn't talk much about the fixed in their mindset either.
No, they did away with it.
They talked about neuroplasticity, so the concept of neurons, they grow and they adopt to change. And I think people don't understand neuroplasticity that well enough to even promote the fixed mindset in that context.
But as a scientist, how much do you recognize this growth mindset? Were you more in favor of this?
As a scientist, I am more in favor of the growth mindset because I do believe in the context of gradual growth of the brain in terms of increasing synapses. Let's say, neurons, they talk to one another, right? So there's a level when you're a child, pre 2 years old, your neurons are growing like crazy, and then there's a slowing of that process, right? And so I do believe that you have to train people in the context of their development. So when they're the first 2 years old, let's say their left brain is growing a lot. So you want to focus on language very much at that age, because there's a point in time when they turn around 10 years old that language development ceases. And so a Japanese child has issues pronouncing the letter K because it's not a part of that language in Japan. If he comes to America pre-10 years old, there will be no problem. So there is there's a role of fixed, there's a certain level of fixed when it comes to neuron growth, but then there's still room for pruning and development. Even if you can't make any more cells, you can still train it to a certain level. So I think I personally feel like there's a mix of both. There's some levels of learning that ceases based on how much your brain actually grows physiologically, but I don't think we use as much of our brain as we could if we really trained our brain even past the growth, the fixed level.
We're going to take up a whole hour with nature versus nurture.
Right,
because you're talking about training your brain in a capacity it already has.
Mm-hmm.
And so we might as well move to this growth mindset, which I think the research that he was talking about labeled it as incomplete. And what I have as a takeaway, because we're still on the section about takeaways, what I have as a takeaway is that praise of effort is fine, but validation of brilliance, that innate brilliance, is key as a first step. And that a student may not believe you if he or she has not heard, you have the capacity to do this.
Right.
Now I'd like to see you dig in and do the work.
Right. Yeah. I think I had some takeaways outside of the growth mindset, or his disagreement, and I really believe that Dr. Wood, focused on growth versus fixed. The other faculty members really moved on to their research, and one takeaway that I thought of was the way we grouped people in the institution. The choir, the ally, the resistor, and the defiant.
I like that analogy very much.
Yeah, preaching to the choir, as that's basically those who know about these. You're head of director of diversity, so I'm sure you have tons of trainings, and you have a set of people that always come, that always support, and they learn, and they're willing to act. And then you have allies, they don't necessarily know, but they're willing to act. And you have the resistors, they don't know and they don't care, right? But they're not willing to act. And then there's the defiant that, wow, that's kind of scary, that those who learn this information know that it exists and aren't willing to act.
Those 4 categories I think we'll be using in a couple of weeks when we sum up and make recommendations for this project, because what I had as a takeaway were 4 strategies that we can use with those 4 groups of people. They talked about educating the allies to make sure that those who had a heart for these concepts, for whatever reason, knew how to implement them, knew how to educate the student, knew how to rescue a student in trouble, knew how to pump up a student who was feeling discouraged, knew how to refer a student who needed an outside support but was perfectly intellectually capable of doing the work. That education does come in the way of trainings and articles that you might share, where you would also be mindful to go ahead and preach to the choir. Don't lose your choir.
Don't lose your choir.
Don't lose your choir. They're doing their research on their own. They're looking for things on their own. They may have experiences in their family where they have faced prejudice for some reason, with a family member, with themselves. For whatever reason, they're on board. They just need to be empowered to talk to other people and to educate the students in a certain way that that gives an example of best practices every time they step in the classroom. So you don't want to lose your choir.
Absolutely. It's like it's a delicate balance. I'm kind of jumping around in the video because another I can't remember her name, the professor, she basically said that those choir members are probably the ones at risk of being overworked. Right, so it's like a delicate balance. You don't, for everything that has to do with diversity, you tend to call on them, and then now they're doing all kinds of things, and there's a pressure to feel that they have to do too much. So it's like a balance, but those are your greatest, allies, because they're so passionate about it. They're so willing to be a part of it. So we just have to. We definitely have to keep in contact with them, but it's easy to keep in contact with them. Just send them an email and they're there, right? At the same time, create more allies so that they don't feel the pressure to always have to be there, right? So allies are very important as well. Like, they're the ones that don't know, but they're still willing to learn. We have quite a bit of allies that we must learn to take advantage of. My fear is the defiant ones. How do I, as a professor, interact? Should I even interact with a defiant one?
I say yes.
Yes?
Yes. Oh, I task you with that immediately. Absolutely. How else can a person who is defiant look at a concept and see another side? I'm not saying that you will convert them, because we haven't even talked about the resistors. They're a little easier to deal with.
Right.
But the defiant who need redirection, one of the strategies they mentioned was to redirect the defiant. The defiant may need to hear again and again why you feel it's valuable. You as a professor carry your own innate credibility. You as a professor, especially with a scientific background, carry such credibility that you bring notoriety to an idea just by supporting it. And when you can discuss it and say, we're going to have a civil discussion about this, and I want you to know why I am a believer, why I am one of the choir. That person has an opportunity to change and grow. That's a redirection. Yes, I task you with that. I task myself with that, not just you.
I'll just be honest. It will require a tone and a removal of emotion, and that might be a little difficult. In that I've been, as a professor of color, as a black professor, have gone through a lot of things throughout probably my whole existence in academia, and to then see someone who learned about implicit bias, and then knows that there's probably some implicit bias, and then refuse to act, that would require a removal of my emotion, and I think that might be a little difficult.
Of course it's difficult, but I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, that you face that every day in the classroom anyway. That you as an educator have to remove your bias against students who don't do their work, against people who schedule you in classes back to back, against an administration that puts another committee on you. You've removed your emotion from things before. if you can do this important work of reaching the defiant, yes, I still task you with that. I do. We haven't even talked about the resistor, though.
Yeah, the resistors.
A little easier.
It depends on who. So there's two types of resistors. There's the passive resistor, and then there's the active resistor. Passive is pretty much easier, I think.
The
That's only
active
15.
resistor I took to be the defiant.
I'm like, what's the
would have
difference?
put that in the category. I wouldn't have split, personally, if I were giving this course and I were as famous as Dr. Wood, I would not have split the resistors into two parts.
That's right.
I would have classified the active resistor as a defiant.
But I think that would look bad on academia, because they were saying 30% of academia are active resistors, and then 15% are defiant. That would make 45% of academia.
Doesn't mean we can't say it
Defiant.
out loud.
Right? That would make 45% of academia in your context.
You can't cloud it.
defiant.
You can't cloud it by
Wow.
misnaming them, in my opinion again, as active resistors. An active resistor
Is
is
defiant.
actively telling you, I'm not having it.
Right.
So is that not a
And
defiant?
sending messages to people that you shouldn't go either. You shouldn't take part in this either.
You shouldn't take part. You as a student don't belong here. I am holding you to a wonderful standard that you have no right to question, and you simply don't have the capability of meeting it. I'm so sorry. Other people do. You don't. It's a fact of life. That, to me, is an active resistor and or a defiant. I did not agree with those categorizations.
Okay. I was just shocked at the numbers. I was like, you could talk about the fact that resistors, I feel, are, I agree with you, many of which are defiant or even indifference. And indifference, in my opinion, not caring is still defiant, right? So I would even
agree.
go higher. That's 45 plus 15. 45 plus 15.
Gives us an uphill battle, doesn't it?
That was kind of sad.
Maybe that's why he fudged his factors, but I was a little disappointed in his
Yeah.
categorizations.
60%.
60% for us to work on.
Yeah. Okay.
More takeaways?
More takeaways.
Okay.
Yeah, I have students here, but they're just listening.
That's okay.
We're almost to your question. We're going to give you some specific questions about healthy campus climate. That's something that they would definitely have an idea to work with. I took away black faculty needs in terms of feeling acceptance. I'm wondering how other faculty feel about that. And I also took away the concepts of scripts, having certain things in your mind, and how to help students retrain their mindset, normalize what they're feeling, because unfortunately, because of biases throughout their childhood, etc., they probably feel that it's only happening to them. But if we normalize it, then it will be different for them. I took that away.
I think you've made an important point that every teenager feels that every kind of angst is only happening to them. We do have a population above the age of 25. I think it's 25% of our students are above the age of 25 who may not feel that way, but normalizing is necessary for just about all of our students to realize that things that they face, they may not be the first one to have faced that. So the add-on that I would make to your takeaway is that slide that we saw, that the employers want those who have certain characteristics. And although I made a note of those who work well on diverse teams and those who make decisions and stick with them, obviously, the third factor that I put goes to your point, and that is that employers want students who know how to tell a story, imagine and create. But to tell the story goes back to marketing yourself. And that's what I wanted to tie to your point. To market yourself, not in the hokey way of, I'm fabulous and I'm doing this and here's my resume, but the idea of presenting yourself as a serious student without having to say, dear professor, I am a serious student. The fact that you are here, we should take for granted that you're a serious student. And this goes back to week 2, where the point was made, we're all educators. From those who clean the classrooms to those who teach in them, as Dr. Lorenz would say, we're all educators. Those of us who come in contact when a student may only have a problem. I'm an educator, but I may be teaching things like negotiating skills. When their problem is not a complaint, it's just a problem. I may be teaching negotiating skills, but I may be teaching them to tell their story, not to be afraid of repercussions, and not to be afraid that it reflects on them as a person who needs help. That was something we circled back to in week 3, I think, was it's cool to go to the Academic Success Center and get some tutoring. That's what makes you successful. It doesn't make you a failure. So I wanted to wrap all that up.
Yeah. Yeah, my students are studying for a lab practical right now. That's why some of them aren't even here. That's how dedicated they are to studies over at Altamont.
Plug for Altamont.
Yeah, come
Hello,
on.
Oviedo and SLM. We know you're watching and you're serious too, right?
Absolutely. Let's look at, because we have only about 15 more minutes or so. What does a healthy campus climate look like, and how can educators foster a healthy climate for Black boys and Black men, or students of color in general? I would want my student to answer that. So would you like to answer that, Betsy? We'll take.
Here's your mic, and I had made some notes. You might want to comment on those or give your own opinion.
Well, I believe that for a healthy campus climate would be sort of eliminating all that bias, like we were talking about, because I do believe that many students know and are aware that there's a lot of bias among students, and especially for Black boys and men. So creating an open environment where people can, not feel that they will be criticized by their skin color, or maybe because people might think they're dumb, or also even reflecting on what she said about some people having a mental disability, maybe offering classes or help for people to be able to maybe learn better as well. I also think maybe it would be helpful for educators who have been in the position of students to also offer a hand to students who are coming in. That would also be a good way.
So I do agree with what she just said, and just to expand on that, it kind of jogged back a memory when I had college math. There was this Black boy, and because of how he was, everyone probably thought he was dumb and stuff, and his penmanship wasn't that great either, so he would ask for help and no one would want to help him. And he would always, when I see that, he's like, I went to him and he showed me his book, and I'm like, I couldn't really quite understand some of the wording, but I really tried to help him. And every time when I do see him at campus, I start to saying hi and stuff, because you do need to make people feel important. You can't just be biased and segregate because of how someone is. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, despite their color or how they are. So, yeah.
Yeah, so like having a support system is so important. I remember seeing throughout this talking about belonging. It's so important for students to feel like they belong, and he addressed this concept of especially Black men going through life, going through college, in the midst of carnage, right? So 30% of African American males, I believe, will graduate from or get their associate's degree. So basically 3 out of 10. And so imagine the 3 out of 10 walking around and seeing bodies on the ground of those who did not make it. And they themselves start to feel maybe I don't belong. So it's so important to just make people feel that they belong. I remember Yashareen was in my class, and she's an immigrant, and she's a older student, and I could tell that she was constantly very nervous. You don't mind me telling your story, right? She's very nervous. She took me in Bio 1 and anatomy, extremely nervous. And everything that she would do, she would be fearful of not doing well for some reason. And then, like, her first couple of tests, she received A's on them, and she continued in that nervousness. So I had to literally tell her, what is wrong with you, right? You belong here. I literally had to say that to her, right? So it's because a lot of students, whether they feel like they, you know, and she will tell you, she felt like she was coming to a new environment and everybody else had just finished high school. And so I literally had to say those words. Sometimes you have to literally say those words, especially the students of color who have in their mind a script. And I know this because I've been there and I've seen it throughout my life as one that went to a HBCU, as someone who worked in an academic success center, as a student at my HBCU. I know what it looks like. I know when students feel that they don't belong, and and especially when they start getting the good grades, you have to reaffirm. So coming from Sanford Lake Mary is pretty much saying the same thing. Another takeaway was focusing how stereotypes and negative comments can be both problematic and motivational. Yeah, sometimes you say something and you're not good enough, and it might motivate some to be like, I'm gonna prove you wrong, or in other cases, not so. Here's another one. Dr. G's persistent underrepresentation coupled by Dr. Strayhorn's survival guilt makes an interesting visual. So just to talk about that, there's some takeaways that are coming from other campuses. There is persistent underrepresentation at the faculty level, and couple that with, when I say survivor's guilt, that's what I was talking about with the 3 out of 10 males that survive your associate's degree. They say, maybe I shouldn't, I don't belong either. Couple that with, I don't see any professors that look like me, and I barely survived an associate's. That's a dangerous visual. I agree with you, coming from Sanford.
In the research, they used a term. In fact, she talked about a model. I was very surprised to hear her term it like this. She called it the other mother model. I thought for this particular topic, that was a very odd way to label her research. But anyway, they talked about black faculty members engaging with black students, and I put to myself, and others, I hope, to show a deep level of caring, a belief in greatness, and a satisfaction in their own work that they would get credit for the way they were educating their students. So I'd be interested in hearing, especially what our students would say about the other mother model, that somebody at the institution either sought you out or responded to you. Does that connection make a difference?
Anybody want to answer that?
Has someone connected with you?
Yeah, I mean, when you're referring to a connection, you mean someone who's reached out and helped you?
Someone who said personally, not just in class.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. At Sanford Lake Mary, Mo, our at Student Life, he's told me, hey, you know, like, you're really smart, man. You need to get out of your shell and start doing stuff, you know. And Professor Byfield has told me that millions of times as well. and she's actually motivated me to start applying to different universities and stuff like that, and not limit myself just to one specific university. And yeah, I think that really helps a lot, because it's one thing to get it from a parent, because students are just like, oh well, they're my parents, they're just telling me that because they love me or whatever. But it's a different thing to get it from someone who, it's not their responsibility for you to turn out well, but they are putting the kindness and the ability to help you out. They see that you have potential, and instead of just sitting there and watching you crash and burn, they help you out, and they say, they sort of put their time and their effort into you. So I think that really would help as well.
I think that's so key. With Betsy, I think she's Harvard quality. I'm serious. She's taking my Research 2 course, and I don't see her any different than Flavio, who, for instance, went to Cornell and he's at Google now. I don't see you as any different. And so it's so important that when these students, when they start to show you something, you may want to step out and reach out to them. Somebody who's in my class was recommended to my class by another professor because she saw his quality. We have to, as professors, definitely seek out. What about you, Yashmin?
Someone reached out to me. Not particularly, but I would say, like, when I do, like for you, when I was, nervous and I had my troubles with getting through your class, and I came to you and stuff, and you made me feel better, because you basically told me that there's nothing to worry about. I got this, and I took that, and I just studied hard, and exactly what you said. So.
Another message coming from the Sanford campus. Professor Felix embodies the other mother concept. Her AACC students tend to be more involved and have higher success rates. Okay. Professor Felix is someone who does that. Yeah, I appreciated the other mother concept. I think we talked about this, I think, a couple of weeks ago. You have to start seeing your students as your own children. That can help eliminate bias if you start seeing them as your own. All right, let's look at the next question. In what ways do campus climate influence non-cognitive, example, confidence, resilience, esteem outcomes for Black boys? How does that work?
Things that I had made note of in here, I think, sum up with importance of mattering. The mattering concept they went into in great detail, and I think this is a very strong point that goes back to the dependence on a group to support you when maybe you're feeling down. The dependence on a group to show you that you are important to that group, that you are either a leader or you're the strong supporter of whatever their concept might be. They used a term called ego extension, which I think you could describe as buy-in, that you have bought into a certain concept, whatever group you wanted to be affiliated with. And that positive attention was the fourth element that I'd made a note on.
Yeah, I've seen students, Black boys in particular, Black males in particular, do really well in my course and then go off to another course and get a C in it, for instance. And I asked them what happened, and they said to me they felt that the teacher didn't care and that they didn't think they were able to do it. And I watched some of these students some of these students you've actually seen that done extremely well, scored 90s on the biology, and then not even in my class. I've talked to black male students who've scored high on, for those of you who are biology professors, we have a comprehensive final. And for them to get 90s on that final and then get a C in another course, and the reason why they say they didn't do well is because they couldn't tap into the professor. A lot of males, I'm not saying it's correct or it should be, there's some people that can make a grade despite of who, in spite of who the professor is. But when sometimes they take in the belief of the professor. If the professor portrays as if they don't care and they don't think they're able to do the work, they literally don't do well. And it's frustrating for me because I want to say, listen, you got to do well in spite of, but that's something to really think about. Somehow their confidence and their esteem sometimes is dictated to by the faculty member.
And that brings us to the concept of mentoring that Dr. Strayhorn spent quite a bit of time on. And that time was spent in critiquing the idea, not buying into the concept of mentoring 100%. His point was, not everyone can help young people. And although I rebel against the term young people because not all of our students are young people,
Right.
that's what he said, that's what I made a note of. He talked about local mentoring programs that were successful because individuals selected their own mentors. The informal mentorship seemed to be more of an asset in his research than formal mentorship programs, which makes the college's idea about maybe we should have mentoring programs needs more research.
Yeah, I love that. He said just because the structures are wrong. I love that. He was like, no screening. They don't, that's so true. Like, we're so bent on trying to get our students mentors, and that whoever they take, whoever they get, we're like, great. And we didn't even screen them to say, are they great quality mentors for our students? And the foundation of as a scientist for our PhD was choosing the right mentor. And we learned that not all mentors are good fits for us. And we had to really seek after not somebody that we just want to work with, but who we could work with over a 4-year period. And so we were taught to screen our mentors based on their own personalities. And so we may have to structure it differently and train the students to screen out people versus just trying to get anybody.
I would like to ask the students, each student, if you have had a mentor and if you selected that person based on his or her qualities, or if you joined a formal program, Big Brothers Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Club, something like that. Have you had a mentor, and how did that person select you or you select that mentor?
I have a mentor now for STEM research, and I elected her by just seeing that she did clinical studies. And I met with her, and she agreed that she would be willing to allow me to be in the clinic during the clinical studies. But I really didn't know like what she was, if she would, treat me nice, or if she had a good attitude towards what I was doing. I mean, but lucky for me, she's great. I like her. She tells me a lot about her stories and how, things in school aren't always going to go your way, but it's just the attitude of getting back up and just keep moving forward, learning from your mistakes, and there's the sun will rise tomorrow. That's the whole.
We won't sing it.
We have some comments coming from Sanford. Most faculty will say that they don't have time, let alone the interest in mothering their students. Yeah, you're right. That sounds like a passive or active resistor, and I understand, but you'll be surprised how much time we do have. I know we say we don't have a lot of time, but a lot of my students don't come to office hours, so I'm sitting in the office for 10 hours a week, and I hardly get them in other than, you know, right before a test or after. So we may want to think of some time that we have and send out an email or something like that. Another comment, as Dr. G states, people, faculty, staff, administrators need to embody the policies, programs, principles that are created to support students. Embody it. That's totally true. All right, so let's get to our last question. What are some strategies and practices that you can employ tomorrow to support healthy non-cognitive outcomes for Black boys and men? I'll repeat. People, faculty, staff, administrators need to embody the policies, the programs, and the principles that are there, that are created. So we might have to start learning the policies. Like, I really didn't start seeking policies until I became a club leader, to be honest. And I became a club leader, advisor, I think 2 years ago. And I've been here about 10 years. So I'm guilty as well. We don't even know the policies. Some of the policies. Let's say.
I know all the policies.
Okay.
But I focused on, when it talked about strategies and practices that we could use tomorrow, I focused on using the growth mindset approach, despite how much I talked about it before, using that approach that intelligence can grow with success, that intelligence is your ability to produce academic work and produce it well. And that can be a combination of nature and nurture. I'm not going to do anything but split the difference on those. We can debate it some other time. But the nature of your brain can be nurtured with your empathy for others, people's empathy for you, encouragement you've been given, self-talk that is encouraging, and other characteristics that make you dig in and do the work even when it's hard, when it may come more easily for some other people. But that ability to dig in and do the work, I find part of nurture.
Sounds good.
So that was one strategy.
Okay. That's. I think we're going to give some time for the other campuses to dialogue with themselves. I just want to thank the Sanford Lake, Mary, Oviedo campuses, thank the students as well as you, Janet, for being with us here at the Altamont campus as we learn how to promote healthy campus climates. Have a good afternoon.